I got these going right across my deck here now. I did not right up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. All right, so this is good too, Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name is Taylor, and joining me shortly will be Tanner. But first, we have a few new patrons to thank. We have David, Emily, and Lauren. With that, I'll go ahead and bring in Tanner. Tanner, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited for this episode.
I am too. I just kind of stumbled across it, and as I was doing it, I was like, you know, we both kind of have like episodes that like we skew when like our bias towards. Mm-hmm. And this one felt like a you episode as I was doing. It's like I felt like this is one Tanner would normally do. So trying to switch it up, get myself off uboat.net and onto something else,
and out into the world. I will say, since you just introduced our new patrons, for patrons at the able C person or second mate tier, you now have access to part 1 of Simzonia, the utopian hollow earth fiction by, quote, Adam Seaborn, who, if you listen to the intro of that episode, you'll see why I'm saying, quote. Just a fun little bonus episode or bonus series I wanted to do. It's connected in with things like the American expedition to the South Seas, the Wilkes expedition, if you're familiar with that. It's a fun little piece of fiction. Fans of the old Dead Reckoning episodes will probably notice a lot of similarities in production style. I think sounds a lot better than the Dead Reckoning ones, just in terms of equipment quality and just being better at editing. But yeah, it was fun to do. That was just the intro and chapters 1 and 2. There are 20 chapters, so I'll kind of just be filtering those into the mix as I record and finish them. And those will be at the $3 level. They'll each episode will probably be like 30 to 45 minutes, just depending on how much I can read, because it takes a lot longer to read a book out loud than you
I'm
might
sure.
Like, you know, more than like a picture book for a child. It takes a long time. So yeah, that was fun to do. We'll have some more bonus episodes coming out shortly as well.
What about media? What have you been up to there?
Oh, it's baseball season.
It is.
The Brewers just lost a series to the Boston Red Sox, which many seasons that wouldn't be anything to be ashamed of. But this season, the Red Sox are not very good.
I'm enjoying baseball a lot this year, too. The Guardians are off to a really good start, and so are the Reds, even though I don't follow them as closely. But the Guardians have Chase DeLauder, who's a rookie, and he has had a pretty hot start to the season. So it's kind of fun to have something to be excited about in baseball.
The silver lining to the Brewers series at Fenway was that Wilson Contreras did not kill anyone.
I saw some clips of that. I didn't really understand the full context of what happened, but I did see there were some hurt feelings.
The full context is that all of the positive feelings and emotions went into William Contreras, and then Wilson got all of the evil in him. So that's what happened, you know, in the big picture. But yeah, that was baseball season's been great. So I have over the off season, I was kind of building up my baseball library. So one of the things I am reading is Pinstripe Empire by Marty Apple.
Nice.
It is a long, pretty exhaustive history of the New York Yankees.
I hate the Yankees, but I also can like appreciate that like that's probably just for general baseball consumption, even like just a massive book of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a different team, basically reading about them in like the 1920s, 1930s. Because for like a long time, for like the first 2 decades of their existence, they're one of the worst teams in the American League. It takes quite a long time for them to become, and it really is with the advent of Babe Ruth that really makes them a dominant team. And then, of course, they continue to have dominant teams basically throughout. So it's very interesting to see, like, you know, the early days of them and not just them, but the other teams that they're playing against. The early American League is a really interesting part of sports history. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff in that book. Just read the part about the 1904 AL pennant race. Some of the stuff seems very modern. You know, sports can kind of communicate across the decades. But then also you'll have like such and such Yankees pitcher, you know, took the mound despite being in recovery from malaria. That probably wouldn't happen today.
Definitely reminds me of some of the first Ken Burns episodes of the baseball series where it's like sockless Herman Hartswell would die in the First World War, but led the league. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As he died of mustard gas at the Somme.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why someone at the Somme would play baseball, but
it's a transplant. But yeah, it's fun reading that part. I also finished House of the Dragon season 2, so I enjoyed that. I think I don't know. I'd be interested. I'm not quite sure how that series is received or thought of by people who got into Game of Thrones just because of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it because it's like it's a lot of the lore and backstory. It's like 200 years before the main sequence of Game of Thrones.
Everyone that I know that watches it really likes it. We're saving it until it's like done, so we can binge it at once. So I don't know. That's when I'll stash away for another year or two, or however long it takes for them to finish it.
I think I want to read Night of the Seven Kingdoms before I watch the series. So that's
another one I know people have really liked.
Yeah, what have you been up to aside from baseball?
Let's see here. Oh, we finished watching our Parks and Rec rewatch. It was nice to kind of see how it aged, and it definitely felt like, I think between it being like the end is early Trump and then pre-COVID, like just felt like a different time. It's a little bit of a time capsule. I don't know. It was fun. It was fun to see how the characters grow. I think the characters develop a lot more in Parks and Rec than in The Office. So I think that is something you kind of pick up on in the watch through. But it was a fun one. And then the more controversial thing, we went and saw the Super Mario Galaxy movie.
Now, is that another Chris Pratt vehicle?
It is. I am just up to my neck in Chris Pratt, as women want. Mormon women. It's fine. 6.5 out of 10. I think the discourse that's kind of erupted around it is far more interesting. My TikTok feed seems to think that that's all I want to see is people's thoughts on the new Mario movie. Some people, I think, were expecting like it to be like The Godfather or something. And then whenever you're like, hey man, chill, it's a movie about Mario, they're like, you're part of the problem. You want this corporate swill. And I'm like, well, maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
They can't all be the Super Mario Brothers movie with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo and Dennis Hopper.
Right. The one that's so bad that it's good.
Because I would watch more of those.
I think it's one of those things where I think people have valid point. Children deserve quality, movies like Ratatouille, for example. Or the Lego movie. Like the Lego movie is the best example of one of these IP-based movies actually being a really good movie.
That was a fun movie.
But like that's a really good one. They're not all going to be that one. Like, I don't know. I think people are getting way too bent out of shape about a movie that's about a video game from Super Nintendo.
You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
Yeah, there is a lot of that of like, well, I didn't like this movie. And it's like, well, you are 34. So it might not be for you.
Well, there's a lot of people that were like, it's just a bunch of like IP placement and product placement. Like, yeah, Nintendo made it. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I found that it's been interesting seeing people's opinions on that. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm in the middle on this one. I'm a centrist lib. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Mario movie. I don't know. Wait till it comes on streaming. You don't need to go to the movie and see it.
Never felt the urge to see a Mario movie again ever since the good one.
Oh, the first one was actually pretty good. The first one was a little better. Well, we have done the thing we do at the beginning here, and I think it's time to actually start the episode. I know there's someone who's like skipping ahead to this part right now, like and skipping the banter as you know.
We should do a double banter.
An oops all banter episode.
Just to trick those people.
I would say they're bad people, but I do the same thing on certain podcasts too.
Depends on the podcast.
It's okay. We all do it. Let's see. Well, let's kick this thing off. But before we get started, I'm going to say 3 words. And I would like you to respond with your, like, kind of your association with these three words, okay?
Okay.
Sort of like the test, like, where they were telling Trump to do, like, apple, bunny, carrot. So, Nazis, Guatemala, CIA. What's coming to mind there if I say those things?
Well, I can't say I agree with the Nazis politically, but they are good with rockets. So that really helped the United States out. Guatemala, I think an underrated nation of Central America, and the CIA, don't love them.
Okay, yeah, no, I think those are.
I would give the CIA like a 2 out of 10, probably.
Like if they were your Uber driver.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that they didn't get the job done. But I can't also agree with the way or the reason it was done. Let's give it a 2.
I think that's a fair rating. Well, today the vessel we're going to talk about involves all of those things.
All right.
That vessel is the SS Springfjord. Is that anything you've ever heard of prior to doing some research for this episode?
Not really. I mean, it's something that may have been mentioned in some of the stuff I read, but it's not one that I recognized when I saw the notes for it.
I definitely think the events that happened around it, I was a little bit more aware of than this actual incident that we're going to talk about.
Me as well. Also, Springfjord is, of course, the capital of Illinois.
Were you sitting on that one?
I just thought of that.
So let's get into it here. There are some nasty, nasty names in here that I'm going to have to try to pronounce. I don't know why I do this to myself. Built in 1939 by Trondheim's Mekaniske Verksted, abbreviated TMH, in Trondheim, Norway. She was yard number 208 prior to her launch. She would be launched on November 11th, 1939 for Springwell Shipping Company. She's 289 feet long. She has a 44-foot beam and a draft of 18 feet.
Did you say Sprewell?
No. Springwell.
Oh, okay. Springwell. Okay, I see.
Yeah, not Luttrell. Luttrell Springwell.
His kids have got to eat.
So she was equipped with a 3-cylinder triple expansion steam engine rated at 188 horsepower, capable of about 12 knots. So not very big, not very fast, but cheap and reliable.
But she's got heart.
Yeah, she has some heart. Springwell would create a separate operating company known as Springfjord Shipping, with her being registered in London. I'm assuming this is kind of just them. This is like their Norwegian branch, basically. I'm sure for...
I guess like similar to how like we talked about with Costco, how they have all the different subsidiaries that are, I think, like technical different companies, but it's just based on which types of ships they operate.
Yeah, exactly. April of 1940 found the Springfjord still being outfitted in Trondheim. Do you know what happened in April of 1940 in Trondheim?
That's the Nazis.
Yeah, the Nazis. That is the Nazi portion here. German officials would have the vessel completed and then turn her over to DDG Hansa of Bremen. DDG Hansa would change her name to the Rudesheimer?
I would say Rudesheimer.
Rudesheimer? I kind of got to thinking, though, like, who is this DDG Hansa? That's not a company that I had come across before.
Well, I know the DDG stands for Deutsche Dampfschifffahrtsgesellschaft.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to try with that one. I went abbreviation off the get.
the German steamship company.
So they're founded on December 3rd, 1881. This is founded by a collection of 17 Bremen and 2 Bremerhaven companies. So it's sort of a collective at first, I guess, where everyone's kind of putting a little bit in to establish this company. I'm sure kind of with the idea of it being prosperous for that region to have a major player in freight shipping. So their goal is to provide steamship connections to Asia, the Baltic, and the Mediterranean. Pretty quickly, the firm would exit the Baltic market, and they would limit Mediterranean service to just the Iberian Peninsula. But apparently the Asian trade was still profitable. I can't help but think what they were bringing to the Iberian Peninsula in the 30s. DDG Hansa would merge with her sister company, the Asiatic line, in 1894. By 1899, the company had a fleet of 40 ships and had expanded their routes to South America. The good old German-South American connection.
Germans in Iberia, Germans in South America, all the places you don't want Germans to be. Then again, you don't really want them in Germany either.
Not collecting together, no.
Or rather, you don't really want them all unified into one state called Germany.
By 1914, the company had 66 steamships and was the world's largest freight shipping company. So they really specialized in the freight game. They were not as concerned about passengers. Through World War I, the company would lose 81 vessels, and that actually just left them with a single serviceable vessel.
Time-wise, so this is World War One, you said?
This is post-World War I, yeah. They are left with a single vessel, which, if you can believe it, is better than World War II is going to leave them. The company would continue to be led by Chairman Herman Helms until 1940. He would be the one that would oversee the resurrection of the company. Service would expand to the Persian Gulf in 1922, and they would acquire one of the first modern lift ships, the SS Lichtenfels, in 1929. So it's kind of interesting. Like they're specializing very early in this heavy lift stuff. So think like, how did the British get steam locomotives to India? Like they didn't build them there.
Never thought about that.
I hadn't really thought about it much either. So the Great Depression saw 19 of the line's vessels laid up. However, they would recover in the run-up to World War II and would become the largest heavy freight shipping line in the world. War's good for your economy, as long as you're winning.
Kind of like Germany itself, they keep getting beaten down, and then, like, unless you take them apart piece by piece, they're going to come back.
The conclusion of World War II found the company without any ships, as they were all either destroyed or seized by the Allies. The company would again return to prominence through shipwreck recovery and heavy freight hauling. However, by 1979, the company struggling, with Deutsche Bank and a couple of insurance companies owning about 80% of the company. The final blow would come with the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
Hey!
Current event. Which resulted in the loss of lucrative contracts. They were hauling a lot of European materials into Iran for the oil extraction that was going on. The company would file for bankruptcy August 18th, 1980.
All right, total revolutionary victory.
So that is a little bit of the history of her German/Nazi owners. In May of 1945, the German occupation forces in Norway surrendered the Rudeshmere, and she's seized in Tonsberg. She would be transferred to the British Ministry of War Transport, who would rename her Empire Springfjord.
Naturally.
In 1947, the vessels returned to Springwell shipping, and the Empire prefix is dropped, and she returns to her original name.
Drop the Empire. It's cleaner.
Kind of an interesting history for this ship already. I mean, it was built in Norway for a British company, taken over by the Nazis, kind of serves, I'm assuming, without much incident in World War II. I was not able to find much about what she did, which is usually a good thing if you're a random...
Yeah, you want a quiet war if
vessel.
You're a steamship, yeah.
Like you don't want to, have a whole big section. That brings us to part 2. If this was like a TV movie, it'd be like Guatemala, 1954.
All right.
And this is the part of the episode where I say it turns into an episode that you would probably do. And I wasn't quite sure of the can of worms I'd open when I started doing this one.
I wasn't sure of how big the banana bunch that I picked was.
Let us begin this section 10 years prior, in 1944, with the Guatemalan Revolution. This is a popular uprising against military dictator Jorge, is it Ubico?
Ubico.
Who had been a staunch ally under the United States.
I feel like Ubico is one of those like classic types of dictators where it's really hard to call him an ally because he's really just kind of like a goon of the United States. Ubico also is, because like obviously he's like in charge of Guatemala for most of World War II. Ubico's like your classic Central American dictator in the sense that he like literally dressed, like Napoleon. A lot of world leaders have been compared to Hitler. Since Hitler, very few of them have done the comparison themselves in a favorable sense. Ubico, real piece of shit.
It sounds like a type of ham. Ubico ham. In 1945, Juan Jose Arevalo is elected via democratic election. He's enacting policies such as universal minimum wage, universal suffering, good things that help society function.
Taylor seems to have made a particularly counter-revolutionary Freudian slip here, intending to say, of course, universal suffrage.
Arevalo had also taken steps to curb the power of American companies and provide some level of protection to Guatemalan workers. This would take the reins of the national economic power into Guatemalan hands rather than foreign companies.
Arevalo here, and like many other cases in Central and South America and like the Caribbean, when you look at some of these, spoiler alert, I think most of our listeners probably know what's going to happen. In most of these cases where, the United States overthrows a non-friendly government, it's sort of depressing when you look at basically how mild most of their policies were.
They're not these like deep red communists.
These are not radical restructurings of the economic system. These are not, banning private property. They're not expelling foreign companies or foreign investment. It's all pretty mild stuff.
Some of it's as simple as like, let's have OSHA be a thing. Arevalo will be followed by Jacobo Arbenz, who instituted land reforms, which granted property to landless peasants. From Gift of the Devil by Jim Handy.
An important element in both the Arevalo and Arbenz government was an appeal to economic nationalism. Both leaders believed that Guatemala could not progress in the grip of a semi-colonial economic empire controlled by large U.S. companies. The predominance of the United Fruit Company, International Railways of America, the IRCA, and the Electric Bond and Share Subsidy, the EEG, made those companies the special target of nationalist politicians and the unions that supported nationalist goals.
Two main concepts shaped the economic policies of the revolutionary government. One, capital should be directed in ways that benefited Guatemalan society as a whole. And two, all private investment, no matter its source, must answer to Guatemalan law.
These are the evil dictatorial decrees that they're issuing. Like, companies have to follow the law of the country they operate in.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that revolutionary, huh? Probably the most well-known of these companies that found themselves at odds with the new economic policies was the United Fruit Company, which had operated in the country since 1901. Quoting again here from Gift of the Devil.
The United Fruit Company complained forcefully that the 1947 Labor Code, which granted workers on agricultural enterprises employing more than 500 people the same rights as industrial workers, was direct discrimination against the company.
Corporations are people, my friend.
The company's running feud with its workers came to a head in the early 1950s, when it tried to discharge 7,000 of them in an attempt to stop operations altogether. Guatemalan Labor Court ordered the company to reinstate the workers and pay $650,000 in lost wages.
When the company refused, the government called its bluff and made preparations to auction off some company land for the back wages. The company, temporarily bested, settled with the workers. I was going to add here, I feel like, if you have like a cursory knowledge of American imperialism, you probably have an idea of the United Fruit Company. But I feel like until I read more specifically about Guatemala in like the 20th century, it's like hard to describe how much United Fruit controlled Guatemala. Like to the extent that there's really no state apparatus prior, at least to the revolution. Electric Fruit Company. The United Fruit Company, they're the largest landowner in Guatemala. They control the railroad. Like they're the ones who build the railroad from like the banana growing regions in kind of like the lowland regions of Guatemala. They build the train track that goes to the Caribbean coast so things can easily get shipped to the United States. They basically build a company town at Puerto Barrios. They control every aspect. Like they control the electrical grid. They control the post office. They control the telegram system when that's a thing.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of things like the Dole company in Hawaii. Very similar process of they are the government, essentially.
Yeah, if you want to do anything, you have to it has to at some level go through United Fruit.
The government's discriminatory treatment of American companies frequently brought the U.S. Embassy in on the side of the companies, quickly turning the economic and legal dispute into a diplomatic one. By the time Arevalo left office in 1951, Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs Edward G. Miller was describing him as an enemy of the United States. Spokesman for United Fruit, under the leadership of company president Samuel Zemurray, lamented the struggles of doing business in a beleaguered progressive institution, uplifting living standards while being unfairly attacked by communists.
No one has it worse than the CEO of United Fruit.
No, exactly.
Or the president or whatever.
For another take, let's hear what Secretary of State Dulles had to say about the situation in Guatemala.
I can never keep these two straight. Secretary of State is John Foster Dulles.
I think.
And Allen is the CIA?
I believe so.
Not that there's a huge amount of daylight between the two institutions at this time.
Or them. They're both truly evil creatures.
Right.
He's a former Secretary of State. John Foster Dulles is the Secretary of State.
I know I've heard John Foster Dulles speak, but not enough to do an impression. Tonight, I should like to talk to you about Guatemala. I think this is going to kind of drift into a Kennedy almost. Tonight, I should like to talk to you about Guatemala. It's a scene of dramatic events. They expose the evil purpose of the Kremlin to destroy the inter-American system, and they test the ability of the American states to maintain the peaceful integrity of this hemisphere. For several years now, international communism has been probing here and there for nesting places in the Americas. It finally chose Guatemala as a spot which it could turn into an official base from which to breed subversion, which would extend to the other American republics.
This intrusion of Soviet despotism was, of course, a direct challenge to the Monroe Doctrine, the first and most fundamental of our foreign policies. It is interesting to recall that the menace which brought the Monroe Doctrine into existence was itself a menace born in Russia. It was Tsar Alexander and his despotic allies in Europe who early in the last century sought control of South America and the western parts of North America. And in 1823, President Monroe confronted this challenge with his declaration that European despots could not extend their political system to any portion of either continent without endangering our peace and happiness. Concluding his speech, Dulles said,
Communism is still a menace everywhere, but the people of the United States and other American republics can tonight feel that at least one grave danger has been averted. Also, an example has been set which promises increased security of the future. The ambitious and unscrupulous will be less prone to feel that communism is the wave of their future.
So that's the American stance on how things are going in Guatemala.
So I assume, based on the last bit, he's giving this talk after the thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so. I think it's kind of explaining what
did our boys do down there?
So this brings us to a section I've titled U.S. CIA Justification for the Coup.
All right.
Land reforms brought about by Arbenz resulted in the loss of enormous tracts of land owned by the United Fruit Company. The essence of the 1952 land reform was that landholdings over a certain size could be expropriated by the government if not being actively cultivated and then redistributed to local farmers. And I think that sounds pretty fair, right? Like if these companies are, holding land, like why are we not using it?
That's the thing. Again, it's one of these very you hear land reform and Western governments shit their pants, but it is a fairly mild policy in terms of, we're not kicking out these companies. We're not kicking out any sort of foreign investors. We're not banning private ownership of these things. We're just saying, hey, if you own all this land, you have to be using it for some sort of productive agricultural use.
Mm-hmm. Although not a communist, Arbenz allowed the Guatemalan Party of Labor to operate. President Eisenhower was convinced that the Soviets could use Guatemala as a beachhead to the Americas. This is just like the continued application of domino theory, I guess.
Yeah, like you really do realize how insane a lot of these people were.
Mm-hmm. Even the ones like Eisenhower that don't get talked about for being insane.
Well, first of all, I wanted to add in here, I should have added this at the beginning. Before we did this, I did a quick listen through the Guatemala episodes of Under the Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I had mentioned it on a media check-in, I think probably 2 years ago. It's by Michael Fox, who's a journalist who spent a lot of time in South America, and he sort of walks basically through Central America and the history of U.S. involvement in Central America.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent podcast series. I think he made or is making a season 2. It's kind of similar, I'd say, to Blowback in a sense. It's not quite as like intense, I would say, as Blowback.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very similar type of thing. Definitely recommend checking all of those episodes out.
Yeah, I have to check that out. That does sound interesting. That's a good way to describe Blowback too, like intense.
I feel like everyone at some point has to come to the realization that the United States is the problem, capital P. And like for me, reading the history of Central America was that thing. Like when, I took several classes, like in college, that really got me learning about the Maya genocide in Guatemala and things like that. And realizing that like the United States handprints are all over all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, this is the problem. No state, no people can be free as long as the United States exists because of exactly the stuff you see here. And I'm sure for some people, there's like different regions that would do that in the United States, meddling in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, whatever it may be. But like for me, it was Central America that was the sort of like road to Damascus moment that like the United States doesn't make well-intentioned mistakes. The United States is the great Satan.
Mine was definitely Native American stuff, like really understanding.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, like I think there's something that even if you have like an objective knowledge that all of these things have happened, I think there's always one issue that will sort of tip you over that point to really internalize that as a basic part of your politics.
I feel like it was the Native American stuff for me because it's so easy to visit places where it actually happened.
Right
here. For some more examples of these things, let's get back into what the Americans are doing in Guatemala. It's a very deliberate and coordinated attempt in the American government to paint Arbenz far more red than he actually was. In a cable to Secretary of State Dulles, American ambassador to Guatemala, John Purifoy, described his first and only meeting with Arbenz. I spent 6 hours with him one evening, and he talked like a communist. He thought like a communist. He acted like a communist. And if he's not one, he will do until one comes along.
If communists didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent them.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing there. Sounds like he already kind of had his mind made up there.
Yeah, and like I don't know the full context of that quote, but you do kind of get the sense of like, especially at this point in the 1940s, 1950s, Americans, I mean, you don't really have any recourse otherwise, but Americans believe anything they see and hear on the news. You don't really have a ton of alternate ways of accessing those things like we do today. I mean, today, there's much less excuse to fall for these types of things when like you can see what these other people actually do on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. At the time, it's like, the Americans will believe anyone's a communist if you tell them they are. And they will think that's a bad thing, which is the key point.
It should also be noted that both John and Alan Dulles had personal and financial ties to the United Fruit Company.
Uh-huh. That's what it all comes down to.
I guess the thing I keep learning as I read history, nothing's new. All the stuff that we're just seeing it more transparent in 2026. It's always been this way.
Yeah, that's the sort of like doubly depressing thing about most of these is like None of the people organizing them actually even believe in them. They know that other people will. They know that other people will be like, oh, we can't let the Red Menace spread. And it's like, at the end of the day, none of these guys care about how these people feel politically. They care about, am I making money or not?
Uh-huh. In August 1953, Eisenhower had given the go-ahead for the CIA to undertake its operation to overthrow the Arbenz government in what was codenamed Operation Success.
Not one of the better operation names.
Operation Epic Success.
Could have had some more work there. Or like Operation Eternal Darkness or whatever Israel is naming their bombing of Lebanon.
Operation We Are the Bad Guys, actually.
Operation We Are the Literal Nazis.
From John Prados' book, The Ghosts of Langley, in the CIA's Heart of Darkness.
Operation Success began with a lengthy Psy-war program designed to soften up Arbenz officials, making them fear public upheaval. Official American displeasure was demonstrated by a change of ambassadors. The new man towed a distinctly anti-Arbenz line. When the Guatemalans temporarily suspended constitutional guarantees in early June, the project went into its operational phase. The rebel army entered from Honduras on June 17th. Many deserted. Agency field teams were horrified. The op seemed to be falling apart when a CIA bomber demoralized the Guatemalans by dropping empty Coca-Cola bottles over the capital. These sounded like falling bombs, sowing confusion with limited damage. That quote reminded me of something from that Under the Shadow, the episode that deals with the coup. From the perspective of psychological warfare, this is a fascinating operation because you have these, broadcasts going out, you have, leaflets being dropped and stuff, but you basically have news reports going out of entirely fake engagements between entirely fake military units claiming victories against the Guatemalan government forces. The actual invading army is getting its teeth kicked in, while that doesn't really matter because the story that is getting out to people is that, they're advancing on the capital. Arbenz is going to flee the country, all of these things.
Early in the morning of June 27th, 1954, the elected president of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz, resigned and fled in exile. He was replaced by dissident Guatemalan Colonel Carlos Castillo Armas, who had led the rebel invasion of the country. At the same time, as this is going on, the SS Springfjord comes back into our story.
I do want to add something before we get back into the Springfjord.
Uh-huh.
When Arbenz flees the country, he does this basically so that the United States will not destroy his country and kill all his people. He gives up. He says he's not going to fight anymore, and he flees the country. He still has plenty of supporters who are more than willing to keep fighting. But, with the collapse of any government resistance, like central resistance, there's not a lot of hopefulness in that.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those supporters flee the country as well. Among them, a young Argentinian doctor named Ernesto Guevara.
Interesting. I did not know he was part of this.
He, of course, finds himself in Mexico City, where he meets up with another young revolutionary named Fidel Castro. The rest is history.
Interesting. So if not for the collapse of Guatemala, we may not have Cuba as we know it.
This is a huge influence on him and people like him who have similar leanings of seeing what the United States does to Guatemala. And they take a lot of those lessons from, how did Arbenz, what mistakes did he make in handling these foreign companies? What mistakes did he make in handling this invasion? And when you get to things like the Bay of Pigs invasion and, all the other ways that the Cuban revolutionary government establishes power, you can really see the telltale signs of they learned a lot from the failure of the Arbenz government to defend that revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is cool to see how that, how that one revolutionary defeat leads into one of the famous revolutions in history that, is continuing to this day.
Yeah, it is interesting how interconnected it all is. So back to the Springfjord, as all this is going on. She's in Puerto San Jose. She's loading a cargo that includes coffee and cotton. And she's actually operating under the charter of an American company by the name of Grace Line.
She's probably got some guns on there too, right?
The CIA might have thought she had some guns. The newly appointed government, obviously, well, not appointed, but the newly established government is on edge, even more so after an incident involving a vessel by the name of MS Alfhelm in May of 1954. This vessel had evaded U.S. sea and air patrols and delivered a cargo of Czechoslovak weapons. Jim Handy writes,
The arms, a motley collection of impractical, obsolete weaponry, did little to improve the effectiveness of the Guatemalan military, but it did provide abundant ammunition for a North American press already on the scent of communists in Guatemala.
Conveniently forgetting Guatemala's previous attempts to rearm from such subversive countries as Denmark, Sweden, and Canada, Time magazine declared, the deal amounted to the Red Bloc's first public display of big brotherly trust and confidence in Guatemala.
Keith Monroe of Harper's Magazine fancifully warned that most of the guns would be used to foment revolution in neighboring republics. The rest, he observed, would be used by the communists to arm phalanxes of peons and Indians, who are already drilling openly on golf courses around Guatemala City.
Won't someone think of the golf courses?
Nothing scares the white American establishment more than taking their golf courses and empowering the working class on them.
We can only measure things in burgers and space in golf courses. So this failure to stop this arms shipment had upset the CIA. Love them or hate them, them and Mossad are not people you really want to have upset with you for reasons.
I mean, you'd prefer not to, but being their friends is probably worse.
Obviously, the CIA is determined to not let this happen again. So they're going to use some new tools. This includes the use of what was called the Liberation Air Force. This Air Force was disguised as being rebel affiliated, and it appeared to have no connection to the United States whatsoever. Never mind that it was American aircraft and American pilots.
We didn't get much better at this before Bay of Pigs of trying to make these things look like indigenous efforts at revolution.
Yeah, at least those ones that just got caught down there a month ago and wasted by the Cuban Coast Guard were all actual Cuban.
We weren't very good at doing it in Iran recently either.
True. How do I say this guy's name? Somoza?
Satan Incarnate, I believe is how it's pronounced.
He's a bad one.
Anastasio Somoza is...
He's a bad one. The president of Nicaragua, Anastasio Somoza, a strong ally of the United States, was aware of the situation in Guatemala and urged the CIA to take action against the Springfjord. In The Ghost of Langley, John Prados writes that it was Somoza who first alerted the CIA to the Springfjord and urged them to take action. CIA Field Commander Al Haney and Agent Tracy Barnes, operating out of Upalaca, Florida, received Somoza's request at 1 a.m. and were perplexed by the request as the Arbenz government was in the process of collapsing. Somoza responded angrily to the CIA's reluctance to hit the Springfjord, saying, "You use my airfields, you take my orders." Fair enough. Fair play.
Fair enough. It does take a lot of balls to talk to the CIA that way.
Right.
If you're a very replaceable Central American dictator.
Yeah, especially when you're just a shitty right-wing one. They're a dime a dozen. You can find more of them.
It's not like you need any particular skill to do what Somoza was doing.
The CIA responded by launching a Lockheed P-38, flown by Ferdinand Shope, who was a U.S. national. Is it Shope or Shope, you think?
I don't know. The baseball player, Jonathan Scope, says it that way. It was probably
Isn't he from one of the Caribbean islands.
Yeah, he's from Curacao or Aruba. It was probably originally Scope.
This strike was authorized by the CIA Field Command, but CIA headquarters distanced itself from the action. The strike itself was organized by William Rip Robertson, a CIA operative who acted as an important intermediary with Somoza, specifically as it related to the CIA use of Nicaraguan airfields.
Rip Robertson sounds like a comic book CIA guy.
It does. It sounds made up.
That's probably because those types of characters are based on real people like this, but still.
It feels like he's someone's a journal or echo tape you pick up in Fallout or something.
Yeah.
CIA Director Richard Bissell. I was trying to think of a vacuum joke. Nothing came to me.
He sucks.
CIA Director Richard Bissell would later say of Robertson, "With Rip, you could never be sure. I'm very fond of him and a great admirer of his, but the niceties of consultation with political authorities was not one of his strong suits."
I think reading about a lot of the CIA stuff in like the 50s, and I mean, really any time in their existence, is there's like a zaniness to it, even as they're doing horrific things in all these places. But it's like there is a very like seat of your pants, agent out in the field deciding I'm gonna truck bomb this grocery store because I think it'll probably get my ultimate goal thing, and then like later call your boss and tell you about it, tell him about it. Like, okay, well, I guess that happened.
In 1961, Robertson would have the dubious honor of commanding one of the Cuban exile teams in the attack on Playa Girón, an event more widely known to English audiences as the Bay of Pigs invasion. Both Robertson and his colleagues Grayston Lynch were evacuated from the beaches before the exiles were overrun by Cuban revolutionary forces.
I mean, I guess to their credit, like they're both actually on the beach fighting rather than just, puppeteering these things behind the scenes.
Grayston Lynch is a forward on the Johns Hopkins lacrosse team.
He's like I guess I'm thinking of Paxton Lynch. He's Paxton's brother.
Grayston Lynch. So back to the attack on the Springfjord. What appears on the horizon? But a plane with no markings, armed with napalm bombs. Bombs. A bomb of napalm.
That's a hard phrase to say, napalm bombs. Baby Billy's Bible bonkers.
Was armed with napalm bombs. What type of plane, you ask? A P-38.
What is that? What's the name? Is there a name for that one?
It's the Lightning, I believe. I think. I'm going to look it up before someone meanly corrects me.
The Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Okay, this thing. I recognize this thing.
Yes, you've seen that at the Air Force Museum before. This version is actually like a light medium bomber version, which is meant to drop things like napalm on
Good
boats.
for bombing civilian steamships.
It is. In the attack, the Springfjord is heavily damaged and set afire. However, she was still floating on January 29th, a couple days afterwards, but she would later sink. She's essentially a total loss. Although, fortunately, there is no lives lost in the attack.
Oh.
I think some of that is to do with her being loaded at the time, like getting loaded at the time.
Well, that's, I guess, a silver lining compared to most of our stories.
As the vessel was British, the attack attracted the attention of the UK House of Commons and various British Labour Party MPs.
Maybe this is why the story isn't as well known, because no white
British.
English speakers die in it.
Right.
As the rest of this country is falling apart and hundreds of people are being killed.
There's suspicion that the United Fruit Company could be behind the attack. A UN fact-finding committee had already been in Central America to investigate what was going on in Guatemala, and Labour Party MP Philip Noel Baker asked them to look into whether the United Fruit Company had anything to do with the attack.
So that the United Nations can investigate and put together a resolution saying, "Oh, please stop. Stop doing that, please.
Please don't do that. Please stop.
Oh, do you have to do that, please?"
Another Labour Party MP, John Strachey.
Itchy and stretchy. I think it's probably Strakey.
Another Labour Party MP, John Strakey, suggested the British government question United Fruit Company directly.
Strakeotomy.
That's what they call it when he questions you. I think it's funny that the British MPs aren't afraid of United Fruit. They don't really give a shit because they're an American company.
Shortening it to UFC, it's like they're interrogating Dana White about this.
I wish. While debating the topic in the House of Commons, it was suggested by various members that the United States orchestrated the coup and was connected to the attack. Our friends in Britain are putting all the dots together pretty quick.
It's actually the United Snakes of America.
On October 20th, 1954, Labour MP Leslie Plummer made the allegation that the British consul in Puerto San Jose ordered the Springfjord's master to remain silent about the incident. So now there's even some British interests that are maybe getting in on this.
I can't talk about how they napalmed my ship while I was ashore.
Pictures from Captain Bradford and his crew that were taken during the attack were also confiscated.
Like, we're only supposed to drop napalm on stranded oil tankers.
Robert Turton, the Undersecretary of State for Foreign Affairs, replied to the allegation that the British embassy in Guatemala City had only asked the captain what statements he might make to the press about the incident.
Somebody's hurting for a turton.
If this had all happened in like the Parks and Rec universe, like all of these things would be true. With regards to the photos, Turton stated that the vice consul had taken the film to be developed and later returned it to Captain Bradford. So it's all a big misunderstanding. We didn't tell him to be quiet. We just wanted to know what he was going to say.
Actually, nothing happened.
We were doing him a favor by developing his film. On to everybody's favorite part, the financial fallout. This is the part that gets everybody all hot and bothered. The Springfjord's owners filed for compensation via the Guatemalan embassy in London. The vessel was insured for £170, and the vessel's cargo was valued at $1.5 million.
170,000 pounds?
Yeah, £170,000 for the vessel.
Okay, I was saying that's a terrible insurance scam then.
No.
If it's just
no,
170.
No, the vessel was insured for £170,000. The vessel's cargo was valued at $1.5 million and is underwritten by 78 different U.S. insurers.
That's divided up 78 ways as to who would pay that out?
I'm not sure if it has to do with like who individual shippers have for insurance, assuming there's multiple shippers. Like if they're shipping coffee beans, like they could be for multiple coffee companies who all have
see.
insurers.
Like the cargo.
So yeah, that's like the cargo itself is valued at that. These insurers would come together to reach a $1.25 million settlement as to money paid out for the value of the cargo.
Well, you actually don't have napalm insurance?
The United States worked behind the scenes to mitigate and manage the fallout from the incident. In October of 1954, CIA directed Colonel Castillo Armas to offer $900,000 in compensation for the incident.
This is compensation to the company?
Yeah.
Okay.
For company and cargo. I think essentially trying to pay out instead of the insurance companies.
Okay.
Because I don't know that settlement's ever actually paid. I think that's just the amount that the insurance companies agree to pay. But I don't know that amount ever actually gets paid. I think partly because those companies are like, well, if he's offering $900,000, that's what should get paid. The CIA wanted to get the situation resolved so that it would go away, but was worried that if they pushed the newly installed Guatemalan government too hard, they would reveal that the U.S. was actually the one piloting the plane which attacked the Springfjord in the first place. So Guatemala does have some leverage here. By mid-1955, negotiations fell apart due to gaps in valuation. Even the CIA knew that the $900,000 offer was not enough to get the job done. They stated that it likely would have cost between $1.5 million and $2 million.
They have to bring in like the MLB arbitrator to get a number that is appropriate.
Leaked documents show that U.S. insurers were seeking $1.7 million and British interests sought $1.3 million. There's also disagreement over the $900,000 payout from Guatemala. Was that just for the vessel? Was that to be split between cargo and vessel? A lot of accountants and actuaries and lawyers all yelling at each other, basically, is what it sounds like.
But at least it's not one guy's problem for very long.
Right. Well, and you know what? At least the CIA got to have fun while they were doing their thing. That's what really matters.
That's what matters. Yeah.
Colonel Castillo was assassinated in 1957, and that's followed by a series of short-lived presidencies until the election of 1958, which saw General Miguel Ydígoras Fuentes win the presidency. That is a unique name.
Yeah, he's the only one I've ever heard that name from.
I feel like that's like when you like read Cuban names, you get some fun names like that.
Mm-hmm.
Ydígoras Fuentes had also been the main challenger to Arbenz in the 1950 election. Castillo's assassination had a negative effect on future negotiations, as Fuentes held a really strong anti-British sentiment. When the claimant's lawyer attempted to meet with him, the lawyer was expelled from the country.
Get the fuck out.
Like, I feel like he really embraced the South American dictator role of like, no.
Also, Castillo Armas' assassination is one of those kind of interesting ones where he's killed by one of his bodyguards.
Uh-huh.
Who just like pulls a gun and shoots him as he's like, I think he's like taking a walk with his wife or something. And so he shoots Castillo dead. There's a lot of like confusion about that whole story. And so it's not totally clear if this was the result of like a conspiracy or if this was a single disgruntled bodyguard doing the thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. And I think also it's funny that like Castillo Armas does all this work to get himself put in charge of the presidency, and he really doesn't get to enjoy it very long.
No, he doesn't. So with the British kind of getting shut down, you might be saying, well, the U.S. still might have their hand in the honeypot. Not so much. CIA Chief J.C. King did not want the U.S. to be involved in taking over claims. The argument was that the U.S. could not prioritize an insurance claim over foreign aid, as aid was supposed to fight communism. If there's one thing we hate more than paying out insurance contracts, it's communism. By 1963, Guatemala suspended diplomatic relations with the UK over issues unrelated to the sinking of the Springfjord. In 1967, the British government officially stated that due to diplomatic relations being severed, they could no longer pursue claims. This would leave the incident unresolved and no money would be paid out as a result of the incident.
Pretty quickly after that, like Guatemala really descends into decades of horror in terms of, the Civil War. And I think I already mentioned like the genocide in Guatemala, primarily against the Maya. So yeah, I imagine like if you were waiting on some sort of like legal settlement or insurance claim to come through, it probably wasn't getting done.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever on the top of the pile.
In that time period.
To kind of close it out and bring it full circle, or at least on the political side of things, Juan Jose Arevalo's son, Bernardo, is the current president of Guatemala.
Yeah, I think it was like 2-3 years ago he was elected. I don't think he has the same aura as his dad necessarily. I think he's kind of like a center lefty, progressive type.
Trying to not get cooed by Donald Trump.
Right. I mean, yeah, one would understand why you wouldn't make radical change. I mean, you could even look at like Honduras more recently, the coup in Honduras. Very similar thing where, things like a minimum wage is being, proposed. And like, that's the thing that is, the deal breaker. And we got to take this guy out. And so like for all of these, Central American and South American coups, I think I wanted to say this earlier, but like with the coup against Arbenz, it's like, not only was Arbenz not a communist, he was very like, he basically just wanted to give Guatemalans the same things that your average American would have in terms of suffrage, in terms of work conditions. And because he wanted to do that independently and not just be an appendage of the United States, he's removed from power. I think that's kind of circling back on what I was getting at of like the frustration of the United States can preach all these domestic goods that it's promoting, whether that's like civil rights, for Black Americans, for minorities.
They weren't doing much for civil rights in the 50s.
Right. For like LGBTQ stuff, more recently, we can preach all of that stuff that we do here at home while carpet bombing all of those people in other countries. It's a long and frustrating, like interesting, but also like, man, we deserve a lot of stuff to happen to us.
I got one final fact for Bernardo for you. You will never guess where his BA is from.
I do know where his BA is from.
Okay. I mean, you've looked at his wiki
It's from
page.
I believe it's from the Hebrew University of, is it Jerusalem or Tel Aviv?
It is.
One of those.
Jerusalem.
Yeah,
Yep.
that I knew already. So yeah, I mean, not probably not someone that you would lean on for revolutionary change.
I was going to say, I just kind of want to know how it happened, but his father was serving as the ambassador of Guatemala to Israel.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know why, but that's something I did know about him. I think probably reading about him after listening to Under the Shadow. Doesn't look great on the resume, I will say.
Right. I'd be abbreviating that one. HUJ.
I went to HU. I went to Howard University.
Well, if you're still here, this might be the part that only the patrons hear at the end. Thanks for listening. And hope you guys have a good one. We're going to keep working at some stuff. Do you have anything you want to tease? Anything you got going on?
No, but I was just reading this. So it looks like he was born in Montevideo, Uruguay. And then moved to
Jerusalem at some point.
In Jerusalem.
And
Moscow.
What movie is that from?
There's a little Blues Brothers 2000 reference for you. Yeah, I think that's it. This was a very fun episode. I was very excited to do this one. Some little stuff I could add in. We have some fun stuff coming up too. Some slightly more like collaborative episodes rather than being like, this is a Taylor episode, this is a Tanner episode. So some fun stuff to look forward to there. We've got some fun bonus stuff coming up. We need to do a movie. I think I want to watch the movie Icebreaker.
Okay.
That's one we could check out. But we have lots of stuff. I would definitely check that out. All right. Yep. That's all for me, I think.
That's all I have. Everyone, thanks for listening. We'll be back at it next week with a bonus episode. And have a good one.